This is the story of Acme Freight Lines Incorporated, the first trucking company in the Southeast to get an operating certificate from the Interstate Commerce Commission. It's a good example of a carrier that rose to expand into several states, only to fall into one of the many forgotten companies in the early history of the trucking industry. Acme Freight Lines was already operating in several states when lines were required to apply to the Interstate Commerce Commission for what was called an operating certificate under the grandfather clause. It meant Acme could continue since they were in operation before ICC regulation began in 1935. This advertisement for the company shows where all the terminals were located in 1935. The application to the Interstate Commerce Commission was filed on February 10, 1936, and was assigned docket number MC 10897. The ICC granted the certificate on December 14th of the same year. The authority granted was to haul general commodities over two routes. Route number 1, shown here, was between Jacksonville, Florida and Atlanta, Georgia, using two highways. Acme was to use U.S. Highway 90 between Jacksonville and Lake City, Florida, and then use U.S. Highway 41 between Lake City and Atlanta, Georgia. Route 2, shown here in the blue line, used three highways along the route between Jacksonville and Atlanta. U.S. Highway 1 between Jacksonville and Baxley, Georgia, U.S. Highway 341 between Baxley and Perry, Georgia, and the final leg using U.S. Highway 341 to Atlanta. This is an example of regular route authority, that is, having specified routes to use at all times. The company had two other routes that had been operated since mid-1935, which were the next that would be applied for in May 1937. One route between Atlanta, Georgia and Chattanooga, Tennessee had been in use since June 18, 1935. An interstate route between Jacksonville and Tampa, Florida had been operated since September 26, 1935. The ICC granted an addition to the certificate in February 1938. Another route between Jacksonville to Atlanta was approved by the ICC, this time going through Bainbridge and Columbus, Georgia. Like other early carriers, Acme Freight Lines found acquisitions of other trucking companies the way to expand. The first one was the operating rights of D.L. Carter, doing business as Carter Motor Lines, which operated within Georgia between Savannah and Macon, via Lyons, McRae, and Perry. There were some duplicated routes since Acme was already operating between McRae and Macon. Other Carter Motor Lines routes were between Lyons and Baxley and into Reidsville. By acquiring these routes, Acme could rearrange its schedules and institute overnight service between Atlanta and Savannah. This would eliminate exchange of freight at either McRae or Macon. Another reason Acme wanted to buy this company was Carter was the only truck line between Savannah and McRae, and also the former owner had financial conditions which prevented continuing in business. Another acquisition was of Independent Transfer Company, which had a route between Jacksonville and Savannah, Georgia. Now, the reason Acme wanted to buy Independent was to balance freight. Most of Acme's traffic was southbound, and they had very little going northbound to Macon or even Atlanta. So by buying Independent, Acme could secure enough traffic to balance the freight. More acquisitions came. They bought Truck State Motor Express, which got them into Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, and New Orleans, Louisiana. They also bought the rights of J.D. Campbell for more Alabama routes. For instance, in January of 1939, they petitioned the Public Service Commission of Alabama to get a lot of routes between Dothan and the Georgia line, and there were 2 routes there going through Abbeville and Ashford, and between Dothan and Mobile, with a lot of intermediate stops like Enterprise, Andalusia, Bruton, Flomaton, and Bay Minette. That was on the way to Mobile. And between Dothan and the Florida line over U.S. Highway 231, and between Flomaton and the Florida line over U.S. 29. Also, another acquisition, Barber Transportation Company. That was going to give them a route between Montgomery, Alabama, and Dothan, Alabama. So they were growing. They were already in several states: Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and into New Orleans, which would mean they would also have to go through a part of Mississippi. So that's another state that they were into. They were growing. In 1940, they had 96 trucks, and they had terminals in Jacksonville, Tampa, Atlanta, Chattanooga, Savannah, Mobile, Dothan, and Montgomery. They were doing okay, but they grew a little bit too fast because well, they also, in 1945, they had bought the land where their Atlanta terminal was at 245 University Avenue, Southwest. They owned it. And through the 50s and 60s, a lot of trucking companies were going to that area of Atlanta, University Avenue. In 1945, in the midst of World War II, things got bad for Acme Freight Lines. They filed bankruptcy. They had to sell their terminal, and they had 125 trucks in the fleet to sell, plus the office equipment. Everything had to go. They went bankrupt. They went bye-bye, like a lot of other companies along the way have. But they had grown to a relatively large company and got into financial trouble, probably got overextended due to their fast growth. I mean, this was 1945, and they had only been operating for about 10 years. So perhaps they got overextended. I haven't been able to see the reasons why. What I do know is that when they filed bankruptcy in 1945, when they filed bankruptcy, they only had assets of $250,933, and their debts were $316,738. So that was it. So that's the story of Acme Freight Lines, a company you've never heard of because they've been long gone. I hope you've liked this video. If you have, hit the like button. If you're not a subscriber, please feel free to. And we'll see you in the next video.